It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
And this is Barnet Bain. I am glad to see you, Freeman, and I am very glad that you've all tuned in for another edition of Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Absolutely. We're glad you're here.
Yeah. So, well, it feels like it's been a long, long week, hasn't it?
It has.
Why
Well,
is that? Did I not see you
I
last
was
week?
away, yeah.
That's why. That's
Yeah.
why. You have an entirely new look.
I was scouting your location. I was up in Vancouver.
You were scouting my location.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of which, how's that going? You casting yet?
I am casting. That was a smooth segue. You
Years
are a
of
radio
professional
professional.
training.
Let me tell you.
How is casting going?
Let me tell you how casting's going. So
For those of you, wait, we should fill folks in. For those of you who don't know, can we reveal this?
I think we should wait a little
All
bit
right,
before
fair
we
enough.
reveal the
All right,
the
all right,
title.
fair enough.
And you know, it'll keep them coming back. At least we know a few people will be back next week for that. piece.
Yeah.
But I am very glad that you brought that up, Freeman Michaels.
Good.
You know, as it happens, I've been intrigued by something as a sidebar to the casting issue.
Okay.
So I was working with some folks and looking at some casting possibilities.
Okay.
And I said to amongst a group of people, I wanted somebody to volunteer and to step up and tell me about themselves.
Okay.
So somebody steps forward, and I'm going to call him Drake Belson, out of deference to your illustrious acting history.
I love how we get
So
that into every show. I
like
don't know why.
I like to work it in just in case.
All right.
In case that.
In case the Young and the Restless decides to bring the character back, they know how to find me.
Well, in case there's any residuals.
Right. That's good. We'll let the Screen Actors Guild know.
So Drake steps forward and he begins to speak, and he says, "Well, I come from a small Midwestern town, and I had a desire to move to the West Coast, a place of all possibility, and I showed up here, and I went to UCLA, and I enrolled in the English department. I thought that would give me a really good background, and it would be useful for things. And along the way, I kind of drifted into the drama department. And,
that's where the cute girls were.
That's exactly what he said. He said, maybe I'll meet
That's how I ended up doing
I know
it.
that's your whole history. He said maybe I'll meet some great girls, and and I kind of enjoyed the work. I found that I was good at it, and
Yeah.
and I loved it. Well, I graduated, and I picked up a few national commercial spots, and they paid the bills for a while, but not all of the bills. And then recently, and along the way, I had some come to Jesus moments with family and friends who said, "Well, what are you going to do, in the real world? Maybe you
your
want a
real
little
job."
fallback position."
Yeah.
So he said, and so I'm pushing a limousine a couple of nights a week because my wife, hot woman that I met in the theater department at UCLA, we're expecting. She's pregnant. We're expecting, and so I said, "Well, that's enough. Thank you."
Mm-hmm.
And then I said to those that were sitting in on the session, so what do we know about Drake? And immediately they start recounting the specifics. I said, well, let's look below the specifics, because all that we've just heard now about Drake, that is a story.
Right. Absolutely.
What is more interesting is the meta story that holds that story, which may or may not be bent to suit the circumstances. It may be an outright lie. I'm certain that it isn't. But that's not the point.
So
the point
is this a subtext or the subtext?
There is a
nature?
subtext.
Yeah.
Exactly so. There is a subtext that I'm interested in. That subtext is the language of the subconscious.
Yes.
And the story that Drake is imparting to us, that comes out of maybe 5%, maybe 1%, maybe 1/10%, who knows, but it is a minuscule awareness of the meta story, of the subconscious story. So what can we deduce about him with our X-ray vision? There is much more to be learned about the meta story from Drake if we begin to develop the eyes of the heart, and we begin to see where is he coming from. What do we see, and as he's telling his story, what do we see in how he holds his body?
I love
Where
that.
is he looking?
I love that.
Did you notice that when he told certain parts of the story, he would look away, and you get a sense that some of the charm is a strategy that he uses not only here but elsewhere, and you can see places in how he just carries himself where he's not entirely aligned with what he's saying. And
these are the adaptive patterns, the
they're
ways to
adaptive
get
patterns.
liked, and
That's absolutely some of it. But there are all kinds of data,
right,
little bits of data that are expressed in the body,
big time.
that are expressed between the words, that are expressed in the underlying strategies and moods and emotions and where he's coming from.
In the breath,
And
or
the
lack
breath,
of breath.
yes,
Yeah,
his
the
breath
depth
is
of the
very,
breath.
very, very shallow. So all of this stuff is of much more interest to me.
I see you teaching a casting consciousness program for all
You know
the
what? My
casting
whole
directors.
life is a casting consciousness
That's
program.
right.
So I bring this up because I am. It has become of late my life's priority to become very intimate with this meta story.
The meta story.
In myself
Fantastic.
and in
I
others,
love it.
because I understand. I am becoming. I'm moving from having understanding to being an understanding.
Right.
That everything is this kind of subtextual soup. That everything is feedback for the subconscious, and
I
that
love it.
who I am
Yeah.
is really the wrangling of is the amount of awareness that I can wrangle of all of this subtextual data. Speaks more to who I am.
I love that. And we've mentioned this before, that everything going on in our lives is an expression of some aspect of our experience, right? That we are either aware of or not aware of.
Yes.
And it's playing out. And
Yes.
and the awareness of which, the degree to which, again, moving lower, deeper into, what's really going on, what's really behind a choice, or what's the energetic frequency of a particular event that shows up in our experience, and how to read that is, as you're speaking, this sort of meta consciousness, this deeper level of awareness where things are not just taken at the surface level, not just at the symptom level. We're looking more causal, we're looking deeper.
The sages have left this beautiful legacy of insight, packed into the most concise little descriptor of what I'm talking about. I am that. Which is a great moment from which to push off. We should push into introducing our guest, who I know will have a great deal to share with us about the that I am. So
that I think I am, or that I really am. Let's find out.
Whether I think it or I know it, it's no less me.
Right. That's exactly right. All right, who do you got for us, Barnet?
You know what? We have with us today Bruce Lipton.
Oh, I'm excited.
We've been after this guest for almost as long as this program.
Speaking of wrangling,
we've
wrangled him.
Not so easy. So there's quite a prize. We're going to have him cast in bronze here and planted him in the corner.
That's right.
Bruce Lipton is a pioneer in what is called the new biology.
Yep.
He was a cell biologist by training, a faculty member of I think University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, a professor somewhere else, as I recall, though I don't recall where. How's that for an introduction? He's the best-selling author of The Biology of Belief and many others. I am more interested in hearing from him than talking about him, so a welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness, Bruce.
Thank you guys so much. I so appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you on this airwave. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, we're so glad. Well, Bruce, in The Biology of Belief, you unpacked how thoughts create reality. You have spoken eloquently elsewhere and everywhere about the nature of our relationship with our subconscious, to which we've been speaking just now, and we'd love to hear your perspective on the relationship that we have to the that to the all that is. How's that for a softball?
You got 4 minutes?
Yeah, I know.
Can you knock that down in 4
You
minutes?
could do that in 4. You could do it in 3.
I bet he could.
Well, okay, the simplest understanding is that the identity of who we really are turns out not even to be built into our system. That's the fun part. Our biology, consider biology as a television set with an antenna on it, and we're playing our shows, the Michael show, the Barnet show, and here's the Bruce show coming from this radio television thing. And this is something that just blew my mind because what it really implied was that our identity, our personal, makes us each a unique individual, is the equivalent of a broadcast from the environment. And this was an understanding that was derived from learning how cells worked, how the brain of the cell worked. And to simplify it, what changed my whole life in 1985 was I wrote a definition of the cell membrane at that time, different than my biochemical formulations that I have done in the past. I looked at it in a different way, and I said, the cell membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels in it. And then I found out, I'd heard that phrase before, because I just bought my first computer, and right next to it was a book from Radio Shack, a simpleton thing, how computers work. And the first couple of pages in the introduction was, a chip is a crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And I thought, oh my God. And I started to see it, and it's like a cell is a programmable chip. And the nucleus with all the DNA is a read-write hard drive, meaning we used to think it was a read-only hard drive, so that the gene programs you have are the gene programs that control your life. The recent science of epigenetics now reveals that it's a read-write disk, meaning that we can change the expression of our genes in our biology and all aspects of that. But then you say, well, who's changing what? And I say, well, it's a cell like a computer chip with a keyboard on the surface, and the keyboard are what are called receptors. They read an environmental signal, just like a finger touching a key on a keyboard. The environment touches the receptor, the key, and when the keys are being pressed on the surface, the same as data entry, and it adjusts the biology to match what was pressed on the surface. So all of a sudden, the start is like, oh my God, that's how stem cells work. They're unprogrammed chips. Put them in the right environment, the signals will click on the surface, and
they potentiate.
Will be programmed.
That's fantastic. And as a former TV guy and a current radio guy, I love how you introduced this. That we're playing our show, as you put it. Picking up a certain frequency with a certain amount of bandwidth or a certain amount of possibility. We happen to be airing on 2 broadcast stations, so you can pick us up on 1400, you can pick us up at 1520, and this in some way...
Just pick us up.
or some way, please pick us up. But this really is a very important way of viewing, what we're tapping into and what's being expressed in our experience, and the malleability of it. Because what I'm also understanding, and you can maybe correct me on this if I'm not getting it right, is there's a symbiotic relationship. So it isn't just that our cells are responding to environment. Our environment is also responding in part to our expectation. I'm taking it a little further, Bruce, so that I'm actually suggesting by how we perceive the world around us shifts. And so we go to being sort of victims of environment, or we start with being victims of our genes. That's the first belief, right? Yeah. That we're victims of this genes that I got and I'm stuck with, and now here I am.
That's the incorrect belief, but everybody's programmed with that.
Right.
So
and now we know that it is highly dynamic.
And I'm going to the dynamic. So I'm going to the symbiotic relationship where I'm going to push even farther to say our environment responds to our expectations.
Absolutely. The hardest part for people to get it's a science that was recognized in 1930, and they spoke it clearly as anybody could make a statement, and yet the people were like, they couldn't take that statement from science and incorporate it in their lives, so we've never gone there. And basically the fact is this: quantum physics acknowledges that the observer is a participant in the creation of the world that they're in. That's a fact of science. When you participate, and whether we're talking about even the experimenters, like you're not, as an experimenter, disconnected from your research. Everything is interconnected. You, as an experimenter, are involved with the creation of the result. And why that becomes important is, well, then look at us as experimenters in life, and what are we doing? Whatever we're creating is part of the creation that we will experience. So it turns out that this whole thing is such an exciting reality game here. In this sense, is that we talked about the cell as a computer chip and the keyboard, and the part that I would have mentioned was that there is a PIN number to get into that cell. And that's each of us has our personal identities as a unique set of keys on the surface of the cell. And when that hit me, I realized that those keys are what give individual identities. You take those keys off, the cells are generic. They don't belong to anybody. But with your keys on your cell, I put your cell in somebody else's body, their immune system says, "Oh, these keys, this system doesn't belong in here, not self." And all of a sudden you realize, well, where's the self come from? It comes from these antennas, these receptors. And I go, yeah, but what's significant about it is, well, you're focusing on the mechanical receptors, but the fact is, no, the receptors represent a complement to an environmental signal, a key. So whoever is pushing on those receptors is not inside the system, but an identity from outside.
It's like a substation. We're going to put a pin in our PIN number. I'm going to step away, pay a couple of bills. We're going to come back right after the break.
And I want to talk more about where this self comes from. I want to stretch that sucker out a little bit.
We will come back to ourselves right after these words.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain and our esteemed guest, Dr. Bruce. Well, esteemed and esteemed.
Sounds like rice.
Yeah, well, we steamed him up. Bruce Lipton, the best-selling author of The Biology of Belief and other books.
Well, before we cooked for the break, Bruce, you were talking about these receptors, and what struck me is in the immortal words, I think of, was it Donovan? First there is no mountain, then there is, and then there is no mountain. These receptors, they seem to be us, then they seem not to be us, and then again they seem to be us. It's like when I was a little kid and I would watch television, the newscaster, and I would think there was a newscaster in that little box. And then you find out the newscaster is not in the little box, and at some level of consciousness, I am both the box and the newscaster itself. I'm generating the entire thing.
Yeah,
an entirely different order, dimensionality of understanding.
Yeah, but the analogy is so perfect in this regard, because it says, look, you're the equivalent. We're each equivalent of like cellular television sets with an antenna tuned to each of our stations. We're playing our shows, and this has really got to me, because when I was doing this research, first of all, I was not spiritual. I had no intent that my work would even go there, because it was irrelevant in my life. But when I started to understand the nature of the PIN number to get into the cell and the receptors, and then all of a sudden, and the concept of like a television, and it goes like this. It goes, well, you're watching a television show, and a picture tube goes on the system, and you say, oh, television's dead. And you go, yeah, television's dead, it's not playing anymore. But then the question that lingers is the broadcast still there?
Oh, great.
And the significance about that is, yes, you get another TV, you plug it in, you turn it on, and when you tune it back into the station, it's back on air again. And I realized, oh my God, each of us is a broadcast being picked up by a set of antennas that if another human comes with it's like a combination code of antennas with the same combination lock as you have, that's you again. But you're not the TV, you're the show. So it could be a male or a female, it could be black, white, yellow. That's irrelevant. That's just the television set. And it's like this changed my whole thing about, oh my God, we have this identity that is disconnected. It's a reincarnation thing that manifests itself, coming back again and again, and then the whole thing got together in this one picture. Now, this is what, if I could summarize it, it looks like this: is we can't go to Mars, but we want to know what it's like. So we send up this thing, the rover, the last one, Curiosity, and you look at this thing, looks like a little Jeep with arms all over it and stuff like that. And what you recognize is this is, well, it looks like this Jeep-like thing. It actually is the equivalent of a human. And why? Because it goes there with eyes to see, and the chemical tasters and temperature sensors and all the kinds of ways of reading the environment that we would understand if the data was sent back. And then I say, okay, now here's the interesting story. The rover is up on Mars, but the guy who's driving the rover is in NASA. And he's sending a signal up, picked up by the antenna on the rover. The rover moves around, right? Has all these experiences, right? Yeah. And then sends them back to the guy at NASA.
This is such a fantastic analogy you're making, for so many reasons and in so many ways. The one that strikes me as the most poignant is that there is a psychic, emotional, mental experience that happens to the drone pilot sitting wherever they're sitting.
Exactly.
That is no less, the subconscious does not make any distinctions whether we are sitting on the Mars landscape or we're sitting in Huntsville or wherever that thing is directed, any more or less, by the way, than whoever is sitting stateside piloting a drone into a shack in Afghanistan or Pakistan. The psychic impact of that, it looks at first glance to be a very clean and
separate
antiseptic relationship with that carnage, but it is no less psychically devastating, because at the level of the larger system that you're pointing to, there is that, to go back to the spiritual cliche, there is that very real field of oneness.
This is the exciting part about it. Think about it this way. You guys are young. When I was a kid, I created what is called a crystal radio set.
Yeah.
And it just had a piece of galenium iron kind of compound crystal. And you attach a pair of earphones to it, and you touch a spot on the crystal with a pin that is wired to the earphones. And all of a sudden, radio stations come out of...
So exciting.
...of that thing, right?
Oh, it was so exciting.
All radio stations come out of the same one. So to hear the individual stations, you have to then create a wire thing that would, you move the needle along the wire, and then you start picking up separate stations rather than all at once. The nature is this: all of us are on this human broadcast. We're that band, and each one of us is the individual little station that plays. As you can break up the spectrum into how many millions and billions of pieces you want to make out of it. And here's the fun part for me, guys. This is so cool because, I'm blown away because this realization of, my God, my identity is really on the outside of the system was, to me, as scientific at the moment of understanding that the molecular character, what was going on, is 2 + 2 is 4. And it was like, oh my God, 1 minute before is like spirituality had no relevance to my life, and then 1 minute later is, oh my God, I'm
a spiritual person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was so cool.
I'm so embarrassed.
What will my fellow scientists think?
I asked myself the most profound question at that moment. I asked myself, the question was, wait a minute, there's a body and there's a spirit, and I thought, why not just be a spirit? And I asked, why have both? And the answer welled up from inside of me. It was so funny because just this thing came right to my head. I asked, Why have both? And the response that came from, which I presume are the cells, said to me, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like?
Nice.
And all of a sudden I said, oh my God, the biology of the body is a translator, a biochemical translator.
A modulator.
And when we sense something through our nervous system, whether it's sight or sound, smell, touch, pain, pressure, temperature, it's converted into what? Electromagnetic vibrations. That's the signal. No matter what the original stimulus is, it's broken down into a vibration, which is broadcast from our brain. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, life on Earth is like a spirit which can have a memory, but it's like taste this new chocolate, and the spirit's like, what? I can't do that. I got to have a body to do that. And all of a sudden, you realize, oh my God, we came here to step into these virtual reality suits, and in the process, not just step in, it's not just receive information back from the suit, but we send information to the suit. So it then has two functions. One, to sense and experience this planet, and two, is to create.
I love it. And I love the analogy of the crystal radio set where, initially you don't really have a choice of the frequencies you pick up, right? And that seems, again, as an analogy, what you're picking up is the signal that you do inherit some signal, some sense of who you are.
Yeah, you're a station on that broadcast.
Yeah, but the idea of picking up other frequencies, the idea of these little wires that you're building out that allow you to explore all manner of possibility, and then what happens? The chocolate even gets a little different in the way you experience it.
It's like you start off as a soup. You start off as a vegetable soup, and by the time you're finished, you've turned yourself into a stew.
you can tell that Barnet missed lunch today, right?
Yeah, so it gets very exciting to realize, and then the joke, because, hey, I wasn't spiritual, so I didn't really care what all those people were talking about anyway. And then to realize, which if you put it back, if you just look at it from the perspective I was looking at it, I thought, oh my God, people think when I die I'm going to go to heaven, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is heaven. This is where a spirit jumps in the machine and becomes creative.
I love that, where spirit jumps into the machine and becomes creative.
The ghost in the machine
is fantastic. Where the spirit jumps into the machine and becomes creative. That is such a brilliant perspective. Sorry I stopped you, but I just had to restate that.
Well, it's kind of it's a fun awakening for me, and the fun part was this, and the whole issue you got into about the subconscious was when I started to recognize that when you step into the machine, you didn't step in it with a clear piece of glass in front of your eyes. By the time you get your hands on the control, which is about 7 years of age, when consciousness becomes a predominant brain activity, EEG, called alpha waves, before that, you're not experiencing consciousness, you're experiencing theta, which is a lower EEG, which is imagination on one end, but on the other end is hypnosis. And so the relevance is this. From the last third of trimester of the birth process and to the first 7 years of your life, your brain is in a receptive program mode, and the significance of it is just simply that how many million facts does it take to learn how to be a functioning part of the community and know how to respond to everybody in a different way, such as the policeman is a different response than your brother, than a teacher at school, and you start to realize you have to know all these things. How do you know it? And the answer is first 6-7 years, download.
And you still haven't had one thought that is not a hand-me-down thought. It's all downloaded,
Yep.
It's all programmed.
It's all downloaded.
The question has not arisen from that, from the aspect that has some sense of aware interactivity. We call it I think earlier on we called it who's in control. Oh, that's probably the wrong language. But that moment of wow, who am I if I'm not all of this data dump? Go back to the beginning, who is Drake Belson if I'm not all these events and all of these stories and
ways
adaptations
right.
and all of these defiance or conformity to all of the mores and value? Who am I? that can be a terrifying moment.
But boy,
and exhilarating.
The fun part is when you get there and you realize you're the guy at NASA.
Yes, yes.
And when you actually have a sense of the controls, I mean, the idea at 7 that it's possible that we begin to in some way be able, in this alpha consciousness, to be able to, be aware that there's elements of choice and there's some dimensionality,
right.
But
Exactly.
it's obviously much, much later in life, at least for most of us, we start to really see the complexity and navigate it in some way that has the potential to make life more fulfilling, where we can really taste the chocolate.
That's where we're.
That's what it's all about. And here's the key, and it's the subject of a new book that, unfortunately, May 1st they're going to hold it till next year. It's called The Honeymoon Effect: The Science of Creating Heaven on Earth. And just think of it this way for a second. I ask people to go back to a time they fell head over heels in love with somebody, and I say, let's look at 3 questions. One, were you healthy? And almost everybody says, well, when I was in love like that, I was exuberantly healthy. I said, did you have energy? And everybody laughs because we talk about the fact they made love for days without stopping for food or sleep. And everybody thinks that's great. But I go to the next one, I say, was life so beautiful when you were experiencing what we're calling the honeymoon effect? Was life so beautiful you couldn't wait for the next day to have more? And they all go, yeah. And I said, well, it was like heaven on earth, wasn't it? And they go, yeah. And I go, first thing, it was not a coincidence. It was not an accident. It was actually creatively done by yourself, and you experience this honeymoon effect, and then it chills out at some point and becomes relationship later, and you lose that honeymoon thing. And if you understand how you create and why you lost it, then you understand the secret of the most important understory in what I just said, and that is, hey, look, the day before you met that special person in your life, I say, what do you think about the world? And you go, man, it's a scary, suck place. It's like my concerns, I'm afraid, and blah, blah, blah. And then I say, okay, 10 minutes after you meet this person, it's like, oh my God,
beautiful.
it's so beautiful. Same world, still there. You're the one that changed.
And you've collapsed the distance between the Mars lander and the controller. You're one. You've extended yourself right onto the Martian surface. You're filled with wonder. You don't have all of this data from all of the past intruding in present. You're just
Absolutely.
fully engaged in your body, in your senses, in your experience, and totally present.
And the significance is, it's as simple as this. This is so simple, and it also is a very interesting point because it really translates. The Matrix, the movie, is listed as like science fiction movie, but when you understand this, then you understand the Matrix is actually a documentary.
I love that.
And the relevance about it is simply this: it says, what was the difference in the honeymoon versus the non-honeymoon? And the answer is this: when you're in the honeymoon, neuroscientists reveal that we're essentially operating all the time from our conscious mind. We're being present, Buddha's present, be here now. Significance is this: the conscious mind is the seat of our personal identity. That's where the station comes in. Mm-hmm. And it's also the seat of wishes and desires and aspirations. And I say, oh, well, what does that mean? It says, when you're in love like that, science reveals that almost all your cognitive activity is connected to the conscious mind, which means every decision you make, you and your partner in that romance, is a decision based on wishes and desires and what you want from life, and all of a sudden, guess what? Blah, heaven on earth, right? This is really great. When the honeymoon ends is that when life gets busy, the conscious creative mind starts creatively thinking, I got to pay the rent, fix the car, all these things like that. Well, then, when the conscious mind is busy, and here's where the issue where everything goes awry in everyone's world, the mind switches by default into the subconscious programs, which are habits and downloads from through our lives, right?
That's it.
And so the relevance is this, is when your mind is present, you're operating from wishes and desires, and when your mind is thinking, you operate from habits.
You're ruminating.
Yeah, and there's so many elements here that is the idea of managing the stressors and being open to mystery and in love with possibilities. I mean, that's really on some level what we're talking about, not to be prescriptive, but just to say these are some of the qualities of the in-love experience that can carry over and play out in other areas of our lives.
Well, that's what happens because you still have the same job, but you don't go to work angry, you're
right.
You're in a different mind.
You also have a sense of the future. When you're in love, you're in the present, and the interesting paradox of being in the present is that it is a generator of hope and of a sense of future.
It's informed. It's informed by the future. It's informed by the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Wishes.
the only moment you have power over is the present moment.
Yes.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, you're in the moment of control of your destiny if you want it, and when you want it so much, you dropped the programming of the habit mind. You didn't use it. And what did you create when you didn't use the program? The answer was heaven on earth.
Oh,
and
that's
when
fantastic.
Did that disappear?
A
When the
virgin
program
future.
kicked back in. So that's why taking the red pill is what? Clear the program.
Exactly.
Because if you operated from your wishes and desires, you would by nature have selected heaven on earth rather than buying the download programs from government and church and people and telling you this is how you do it. Why their programs suck.
So here's
Program does suck.
here is we're going to throw you now really the hardball. We only have a few moments left, Doc. So what is the prescription? What's the red pill?
Oh, you're going to do it.
What's the
Go.
red pill? What can we leave our listeners with so that they have
the most important thing is this, is that the two minds are separated, conscious and subconscious. They don't learn in the same way. Exercises, reading books, going to lectures and all that absolutely can educate the conscious mind. Aha can educate the conscious mind. That's all it takes. It's creative. The subconscious mind primarily learns. The two fundamental natural ways it learns is hypnosis, which is occurring before you were 7, and habituation, which occurred after 7. Anything you needed to learn in the subconscious, things that you repeated over and over and over and over again. Well, those are the programs we added after 7. The first 7 years are the programs that we were not even conscious during that time when our brain was just downloading and not filtering any of the download, just downloaded it. And so the point is this, is that you want to change those beliefs. Well, you can't talk to the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the equivalent of a tape recorder. If there's a tape playing in that thing, and then it's got a program you don't like, and I say, okay, go up and tell that tape player you don't like the program. And I say, well, how long is that going to happen before the program changes? And the answer is never going to change. So there's your big problem right there. The issue is you got to push the button, and that's hypnosis, habituation, and a new area that's the most exciting thing in the whole world called energy psychology. And these are modalities that engage a super learning process. And the significance is mind-blowing, is that you can rewrite limiting programs in matters of minutes, 10, 15 minutes, rewrite a program that's limited you in your life in that kind of time period.
That's worth doing. All right, well, listen, we are so thrilled you took the time to hang with us today. I think we've covered heaven on earth, how it's going to, the prescription for heaven on earth. And we
now
hope
that's handled, folks.
Yeah.
What are you going to do for the rest of your lives?
That's right. So folks who want to stay tapped in, it's brucelipton.com. And, of course, you can get all of Bruce's information here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. And we expect, Bruce, you to come back so we can talk more. Thanks for joining us today.
I so enjoyed it. Thank you guys very much.
And for those of you listening, stay tuned because we'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
That's right. Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. That was a pleasure to have Bruce on. I'm exhausted from it.
That was a
lot.
gas.
That's a lot to take in and to let in. So much there to think about.
I love it. And there's a couple things just right at the end. The way that habituation and the two pieces, the trance-like state, some element of being able to snap that, in my mind, that's what's coming up for me. And then also with habituation, we've talked a lot about with a sense of vision to develop practices, not a vision in terms of an outcome, but the qualities that we're sort of following, like the scent and the sense of vision that's playing out in front of us, and then the practices that seem to really expand that and allow us to, in a habitual way, set ourselves up for consistent expressions of those qualities. That's a way in my mind to shift the habituation so we're not just on the proverbial hamster wheel, going round and round, that there's some other way of navigating our experience that allows for a richer, more of the chocolate experience.
Yes, indeed. I mean, Bruce was alluded for a moment to to the quantum science. We will unpack that more fully next time he's on the show.
Yeah.
But one of the ways to begin to play with getting off the habituated relationship with our subconscious programming,
Yeah.
what we've called here the reservation or structured imagining, which is another way of referring to the state of becoming entranced.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways when we begin to understand that it is a trance, that there is this quantum state that is outside of time and outside of space, that is an energy physics. Then just as a playful experience, we can extrapolate what is the straight line vision? Given where I'm coming from in the past and what my beliefs are and what my experiences are, what can I safely assume my future is going to look like around whatever area I'm concerned with, my marriage, my relationship, my health, whatever it is. But again, going to this deconstructing of the trance and aware of the quantum state, you can also begin to play with energetically, well, what if that past was entirely different? What if my past was entirely different and I had healed that? What might the future look like there?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
What might a future look like an entirely different parallel? Like if I was like from some kind of Superman comic or something, and there was a bizarro world and there was a whole nother version of me, what might that one look like? And what might it look like if there was the most optimal future where absolutely everything that could possibly go right went right? What would that look like?
Follow that scent.
As we follow that scent and we marinate in those energy fields, in those quantum fields, they have an impact on the entire soup. They begin to change the cellular structures that Bruce was talking about. It begins to change the subconscious messaging. It begins to rewire and fire neuronal patterns in the brain. It begins to express different genetic sequencing. We have the beginnings of the whole science of epigenetics that support this science.
Yep.
And Bruce's work speaks to this at some depth.
Yeah, big time. And I, again, going back to the idea, in love with possibility, really willing to put aside known for unknown in the most, again, we've used these language before, generative way.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How many kinds of possibilities can you off the cuff generate?
So the short answer is going to be
use your imagination.
Tracking that is really relating to my own boundaries, because obviously we both know it's infinite, right? But you can't. What do you do with infinite? When someone says, "Can you imagine infinite?" You're like, "Ah!"
So let's talk about the future for your kids.
Yeah, that's interesting.
3 separate futures.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, well, one is this level of that sort of optimal, like anything's possible. And
can you be specific?
Yeah. So, where they're not tied to limited expressions of who they are. So there's no that it's not about job or good job. It's not about completing any of my.
What would that look like? Because you can't really feel that. I mean, Antonio, I've seen him dance.
Yes.
And he's so filled with life when he's dancing.
Ecstatic.
So I can envision him as a grown man going to his job with that passion.
That's it.
With that joy.
That's
with
it.
that experience of the dancer in every part of his body and bringing it to his relationships. And so met.
And also I'm sorry I cut you off, but also that I love when Bruce was talking about putting the crystal radio set together. That level of exhilaration, of discovery. Doing. Well, and yes, and what brings, so it brought Bruce Lipton as a small boy to the radio set was possibility. He was offered this possibility that he could tap into frequencies that could come through this machine, and he could play with that.
But he also realized he is himself a radio set.
That's right.
So if what I'm really I'm pushing this because I'm really interested in what does it look like when we begin to own that we can broadcast different stations.
Yeah.
So one station is Antonio, exhilarated in that way. Another one is Antonio, a grown man, happy, but basically a drone in the system.
Right.
That's another real possibility. The more possibilities, the more stations we generate, the more power we have to choose between them. Another one is a nightmare one where, God forbid, he doesn't, he's not fulfilled or he's unhealthy.
Hooked in habits that are destructive.
Okay, so there's 3. And then another one is that he has this life where he suddenly goes off and does this completely, he moves to France. We use our imaginations. We just cut them loose.
So let me do this.
Yes.
Because I'll even go farther than that. They're all real. They're all playing out. They're all threads of possibility. And if I'm going to go way off the reservation, I know this is going to be iffy. I generate them all in my experience of him. And it's not an outside thing.
That's right.
To the degree I'm owning possibilities and I'm navigating them in this way that we're talking, then everything is possible. They're all him, and they're all playing out.
As a visionary, when we talk about how do we generate vision, this is a very, very real technique. And artists, many artists that I've had the pleasure to work with, they do this, and then they grow into the expression of that. As a visionary, to understand that Bruce is talking about how this is grounded in science at this point. You unpack as many visions as you possibly can, and the part of us that is threaded back to the past, that part wants to play small. Oh, it doesn't mean anything, it's a waste of time. The part that is operating as a visionary, as an artist, as a magician of life, understands that these things, because I'm feeding them my attention, energy follows attention, because I am myelinating new neuronal patterns, because I am doing this, it may not show up exactly as I am holding it, but I am rewiring a whole set of possibilities, and quantum science supports that nothing unreal exists, that every possibility is already awaiting in potentia.
And neuroscience confirms it. So again, just by imagining in a fear thought, let's say, I go on a fear thought, the neurology is experiencing it in a very real sense. So look, the fact that so much of my life has been driven by fear, and I'm not in that space in the ways that I have been, but I see it mirrored all around me as threads of possibility, right? I see it showing up everywhere where folks are running that story. I call it the hell of our own creation. We've talked about this, about the enemy within, that then is a thread of possibility. And to the degree I'm hooked into that, congratulations, it's real. And that whole storyline is playing out in real time because that's where my attention is focused. We've got any number of options, right?
I know we only have a moment or so before we're through on this set. Are we finished?
No, we have a few minutes.
We have a few minutes.
Yeah.
So for those that are listening, who relate all too well to what we're saying, what you just said, Freeman, we have a fear story. One of the powerful ways to begin to derail that fear story is not to go to war with it.
No way.
To embrace it, and in the same way when you're driving sometimes in the night and you pick up one radio signal and then all of a sudden there's another radio signal and they blend into something different and greater than some of the parts, oftentimes totally unintelligible, but nevertheless a signal. You add to that fear signal, you add to it an optimal future, an alternate future, a possible future. The two of them blend into a paradoxical signal. They blend into something greater than some of the parts, into a different harmonic. And when we talk about energy physics, that is a very, very real prescription for the kind of life that you can grow into.
And the challenge is, from a habituated standpoint, the fear message is really strong, and it's really challenging to be in love with the possibilities. And yet I'm committed to it. I'm not saying I'm not, that this is why we're here, but that optimal future for a lot of folks is hard to imagine because they've really spent a lot of time imaging their fear future, and that's where they land in the middle of the mediocre.
You don't have to imagine it with a sense of ownership. You don't have to.
That's a great point.
You don't have to put yourself through the ringer that says, for me to imagine it, I have to
that's a
believe that
great
it
point.
is possible.
No, that's a great point.
There is enough of you
That's
that
right.
is on board with your willingness to even play the game.
Or you wouldn't have
That
this
is-
show on, to be
that-
honest.
exactly.
You turned this
That
off
is-
a long time
That
ago.
is pulling for you.
Yes.
That is pulling for you, that over and above the part that is the traditional buzzkill, this won't work, the yeah, but,
The
yeah, but,
droning
yeah,
out
but
of
this
that,
is a waste of
yeah.
time, yeah, but over and above that, the ability to come at with a sense of innocence and humility in the understanding of humility as that even though it always went this way, in the very next second, it could all be different.
It could be different. And we ran out of time. So that's it. That's the end of the show. That's it. We did it. Goodbye.
It's over.
Keep coming back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.